Hello, and welcome to this confirmed Super Bowl at home edition
Oh my god.
of the Purple Journal podcast. I actually had a different name for this week lined up, but about 15 seconds ago, I realized that both of the other hosts of this show, in Joe Oberly and Luke Braun, are having a contest as to see who can drench a blanket more.
You want me to leave, don't you, Joe? You just want me to leave.
We got
right
5
back.
seconds.
You know,
We got 5 seconds into the show, and you ruined the whole season.
There you go. That's my role here. And yeah, Joe, you're right. This is like when you're in a relationship with somebody and you turn kind of cold to give them signals. Like, I don't want to break up with you. I just want you to leave so I can blame it on you. But that's my way of doing it. But yeah, there's a lot of excitement surrounding the Vikings, especially, at least comparatively, on a national level, since apparently this is the first week that a lot of the national media is aware that the Vikings are at least a good team. So I'm excited, but full disclosure, I am not on the Super Bowl bandwagon. I'm just happy that the team is doing well, and for the most part getting recognition, because I'm a super selfish person and I just want to read more terrible national articles like the one we were making fun of last week.
That's just the thing, though. God dang, you're a Vikings fan. I mean, things can fall apart in a heartbeat, especially in this league. It happens all the time. And we 5-0 last year, and look what happened. Look at this Chiefs this year. They're 5-0, and now they're like 6-4. It's injuries can happen in clusters. Stuff happens. You lose a freak bounce of the ball and you start a string of bad things coming. You just gotta. God, this is so bad. But you gotta take it one game at a time.
Yeah, I'm trying to find like a balance between. And I wrote an article today about the national media thing and I mentioned in it that you guys, particularly outside of not liking the title of the show, you don't also like, for valid reasons, talking about power rankings because they don't really matter. But I'm kind of a geek for that kind of stuff, just because like when my favorite thing to do is when the Vikings win, drive around Lake Nokomis, humble brag, and listen to the middle class lake. Look at me now. Listen to like the K-Fan post game terrible call-in type stuff, and then watch like the different highlight shows. And typically the Vikings are like the last thought, the final thought, like, oh, and also here was a game right before commercial break, and this happened, and that's it. They don't really get in depth. So for me, it's like I clearly have anxiety issues, and a lot of them are based around the Vikings. So I'm trying to like enjoy what we have right now without looking too far in the future, because as I've said on multiple shows, in reference to like the Bradford injury and everything, it's like we have to really savor times like right now, without extrapolating that into like this whole expectations for the rest of the season sort of thing. So it's kind of a weird balance.
But what can the attention? How can that actually in any way benefit anybody other than a fan? It can't benefit the team. The only thing it can possibly do, and I'm not sure it will, is give them a false sense of themselves, or delusions of grandeur, if anything, and Zimmer has to beat it out of their heads. It's just fine. Even Rudy mentioned it yesterday. He mentioned why not us, and it's like that's fine. It's all fine. Good. I don't mean to be a total wet flag. Well, yes, I do. And
Rudy Rudiger.
Okay. Rudolph.
Oh.
Kyle Rudolph. And, I just think, fly under the radar. That's why Zimmer likes it, and it's better for the team. They keep digging in each, because they're not, a superpower team that can just waltz in and by sheer reputation win ball games. They've got to grind them out. They've got to play great every week. They've got to have superior quarterback play from Case Keenum. They have to have a defense that's healthy and clicking on all cylinders. They have to have a running game. On and on and on. They're just, it's anybody in this league. Anyway, besides.
Yeah, I mentioned that too.
I cannot find a way to care about what the national media thinks about the Vikings, especially power rankings. Like, who gives a crap?
Yeah.
Oh my God, someone thinks the Seahawks are better than the Vikings. Okay, maybe they are. Who knows? Just play 10 games, Vikings versus Seahawks, and then we'll really find out. Otherwise, we'll never know, and who cares? Like, if the national media doesn't give the Vikings that much screen time, that's okay. There are other storylines in the league. There's Carson Wentz is a surge. There's the downfall of the Seahawks defense and all of the injuries over there. Usually on those shows we'll see a debate about should the Vikings start Case Keenum or Teddy Bridgewater, because that's interesting enough to be a national talker. But other than that, who cares? Honestly, the Vikings defense has been good for years and years. It's boring now. What are they going to say? Hey, Everson Griffin's still good. Okay, next talk. Like, what else do they have to add to that?
Yeah,
I don't care.
I just
like about whatever they want to talk about.
I just like
Let's
having more to, which is ironic because I'm probably the least well-read of everyone on this podcast in general and in terms of the football. I just like having more content to, I just figure I don't think it's good for. I actually said in my article that it might be counterintuitive and not that it matters that much because they're professionals, but Zimmer's a master of bulletin board material. I did pick up on some quotes yesterday that, in regards to what you said, Joe, like getting it out of the team's head, where like Everson Griffin was keeping it real and saying, how good the team was, and it seems like they're getting not overconfident, but they're starting to believe in themselves, and that always harkens back to that San Francisco game where it's a national game.
That's a good point.
I'll
get kind of that. Yep.
I read something this week.
Go ahead.
Who, me?
I was going to say, I agree with your point about them having more confidence in themselves. It's a great thing. I mean, you look back at their 2 losses. One of them came after they found out their starting quarterback was done, or not done, but injured, not going to start the next week. And the other one came during the game in which their star sensational running back got hurt. I mean, these are emotional hurdles to get over.
Yeah.
And I really feel like now they're starting to believe in themselves a little bit more. They know that they're deep enough that they can surmount some of these things. And if problems do arise, they're a team that's going to stick together and still good enough and deep enough to figure it out. So yes, I totally agree with you there, Joe. That is worthwhile. But as far as the national media, I do listen to I do read the power rankings. I just go to see what they are, and just to see what they say, scoff at them and move on, because I know it's just another person's opinion, just like my own. So I used to think they had a lot more sway or than they do. They're just guys, they're putting something on the site to get some clicks, and it's very effective. But ultimately, let them play them one game at a time, as far as I'm concerned. The old guard of wet blanket of history and reality is spoken.
Speaking of the old guard, real quick, I should just introduce you guys, since that's how the shows work. Before we get into too much, that's Joe Oberle, the old guard. He is a writer for purplejPTSD.com and the Sports Post, and that's also Luke Braun, who is representing the what are you? You're a handmade quilt, and Joe is a Afghan, and you're both relatively soaked. Luke writes for Purple PTSD.
You've largely mischaracterized how I'm going to review this Rams game.
Ooh. Well, that's good news. And Luke's also the co-host of the Pocket Protectors podcast. Real quick, I kind of picked up on this, but how you guys doing?
I'm feeling good, man.
I am. I had a rough week last week, and this win put a smile on my face. So I've been smiling for a day and a half ever since. It was great fun to be there and see that going on yesterday, because they took it to them. They took it to a good team, and that's always a good sign. And
for people that don't know, Joe is the fancy member of the show. He has a press pass. Speaking of humble bragging, so he gets to go to every home game and then also watch the team in the shower. And he is the my
special sticker on my press pass for that.
VIP. My biggest concern with moving to the vault, it was the home field advantage and the 12th man and the sound. The Metrodome was a dump, but it was our dump, and it was a loud dump. Speaking of loud dumps, I'm not going to finish that sentence, but
come on, man.
I got to class this thing up. It was mentioned during the game yesterday multiple times how loud the stadium was, and with all the talk of the home field advantage, with the Vikings being currently the second seed, and now the dreaded, for some of us, Vikings aiming for a home Super Bowl talk. Do you notice, Joe, like that the sound level is palpable in that regard? I know that the surface that they put for the ceiling was supposed to reflect sound, but I've only been there once. It was a preseason game. I really couldn't tell how loud it was, but I've heard that the stadium is so big that maybe the sound doesn't travel the same way as maybe they expected.
Well, I'm at a little bit of a loss. I put it in my story. I mean, I sit in the third row of the press box, and there's an overhang that not only blocks the big screens, I got to put my head down to see them, if you can believe that, and it also knocks out some of the sound. I've gone down to the first row, and it's completely different. But I put in my game wrap story yesterday that this is the loudest I've heard the stadium in the year and a half that I've been going to games there. So it was really loud yesterday. And
Jared Goff was struggling with it too.
Yeah.
He really, I mean, not only were there like ill-timed timeouts, and I believe there was one delay of game, but you could see a lot of miscommunication. You could see them like getting confused before the snap, and he was rushing to get an audible call in, and then someone couldn't hear it, and you have to repeat the audible call, and then that led to either pressures or some plays where like throws would look super erratic and out of place, like where someone went the wrong way or didn't quite run the right thing, and they were definitely out of sync for a lot of that. Even though the Rams are made up of a lot of good players and their ability was flashing, but you could tell that there was just they could never really get their offensive rhythm going, and the crowd had to have a factor in it.
They found their voice to a certain degree. They knew most of the fans knew it was a big game, and they knew maybe they realized that Goff is a young quarterback, and Zimmer, like he does every week, always wants the noise in there. But being, I suppose, a defensive coordinator, he understands the power of that. But it was clearly on display, just as Luke said. It was amazing that how many plays it affected. When you see guys having to get the call twice and run closer to, timing's going to mess up. That so many things can happen. It was phenomenal in there yesterday. So, Joe, yeah, I totally think it was.
And we'll kind of get into the game a little bit later, but really, I mean, it was a big statement to take the NFL's top offense and really hold them to 7 points, and this is kind of a hyperbolic topic, but I did want your guys' opinion on this. Me and Luke were you born in the 80s, Luke, or the 90s?
No, early 90s.
Early 90s. So yeah, I was born in 84. Luke's a 90s baby.
I'm a little baby.
Joe was born during the Dust Bowl.
That's right, Sonny.
I was wondering, not so much whether or not this is like the best Vikings team ever and comparing them to, whatever. It just seems like this is a combination of probably the most balanced Vikings team I've seen, and also a different type of Vikings team. With the way the game started yesterday, and the way that this team seems to overcome like things that would kill our Vikings teams regularly, where you start to get a feeling like, all right, it's falling apart, especially with like Forbath missing those 2 field goals. There seemed to be a lot of like questionable flags that were extending drives that typically would be kind of a big variable in terms of how the game would fall apart. Where do you guys stand on, at this point in the season, not looking deeper into the year or whatever, but just how this team is playing in regards to overcoming typical Vikings things like injuries and slow starts or missed field goals or just things like that? I mean, does this feel like a different team to you? Not to, again, like imply that they're going to win the Super Bowl, but it just seems like I'm struggling with like typically like seeing things, like in 2009 championship, seeing the turnovers. I was like, all right, I know what's going to happen. The game's already over. It's only like the early third quarter, but I can see the writing on the wall. It's like a Shakespearean tragedy. I can already see it. It just doesn't seem like this is that type of Vikings team,
You can have it, Luke.
I think that assumes kind of a narrative that, like, woe is me Vikings fans tend to, like, blow way out of proportion. And I think that the Vikings fans have been subjected to quite a lot of heartbreak, a lot more than other, most normal teams. But
thank you.
Most teams are not immune to penalties and turnovers. Like, that happens to everybody. We just get way madder about it because we think we're victims.
And injuries also, just for like the last.
Same
two
thing
seasons,
though. How many? I mean, I feel like half the teams in the league have lost their quarterback. We've had like Blaine Gabbert versus Tom Savage in a game. Like, this is ridiculous. But this feels different, I think. Like, we're we're committing a bunch of penalties, and we miss some field goals, and we're missing extra points. And all that stupid stuff is still happening, but it's amazing how forgettable it becomes when you can just squash the team because you're that much better than them.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what happened on Sunday. I mean, not that I actually still don't think that on paper we're a better team than the Rams. I think we just came out there and outplayed them that day. But we did. We just outplayed them that hard, and it meant that when you miss 2 field goals, those 6 points weren't missed because we still won by what was it, 17?
Yeah, and I guess my underlying narrative that I was attempting to softball out there is, I think that it all just comes back to the way Zimmer coaches the team, and we touched on this earlier with getting things out of the players' heads and not letting them get too confident. But it just seems like a lot of this comes back to just from when Zimmer started coaching this team. It's just been a different kind of team. Obviously there's been some heartbreak there in like the San Francisco game. They came in maybe a little too confident, and the injuries didn't help. But it just seems like Zimmer really keeps this team level, and they despite all that weird news with toxic leadership and everything, it's always seemed like this team really buys into what he's selling. So that's kind of where my head is on everything. It's just Zimmer's.
I do love the culture that Zimmer's created.
I guess I would agree that they're a more resilient team. Maybe I would go that far to say that. I think, maybe if you stripped it down player by player, you got some people with some scar tissue, or that have not necessarily scar tissue, but people that
scar tissue too.
Well, look at the quarterback. He has gotten knocked around. He's gotten grief. He gets asked the same questions and told he's a backup every week, and he's out there going for it. He's not letting that stuff get to him. You got a guy like Adam Thielen who's been told his entire coming up of his career that you're this and you're not that. So and he's battled through it and just done his job. I mean, maybe if you look at some of the players and who they are and where they come, but there's that. But I think Zimmer, took his lumps last year when he made some mistakes with how he talked about some players in the press, and I think he talked about it with them after the season, and maybe he's even a better guy to motivate them, and they're rallying behind him. I mean, when you hear him talk, week to week, someone's always mentioning, the way the coaches are, the leadership in the locker room, and blah blah blah. So there's something to it. I would say that they're a more resilient team. Maybe it comes from winning. It comes from them recognizing they have some depth and they can play with it, and they're winning ball games. I would say there may be something to that. I wouldn't make that go about and say they're the best team ever. As a result, I just think they believe in themselves a little bit more than some of the recent ones have.
They have a formula that is destined to take them deep through the playoffs. I think, I know you're just trying to get us to talk about if this team is a Super Bowl team.
You are correct, sir.
Let me hit that head on. There is no such thing as a Super Bowl winning team. There are many teams in the league that are probably above a threshold of capable, and then they're going to duke it out, and the playoffs are weird. But I guess people kind of forget that, once you've made the playoffs, now you have to go on a 3 or 4 game winning streak.
Yep.
Only one team's going to do that. Of the 12 playoff teams, you probably 6 or 7 of them will actually deserve to be there, and most of them will be in the NFC. Only one team gets to come out of that. Like, I guess I just hate the, like, is it a Super Bowl team or is it not? Like, it's a playoff team and they'll have a shot. I don't know. Then we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
And somebody's going to fumble or a tipped ball's going to go weird and that's going to decide a game. Like, weird crap happens, and I hate people saying that, like, they're either a Super Bowl team or they're not. They're good enough. The Eagles are good enough. The Saints are good enough. I'd argue the Rams are good enough. Patriots and Steelers are good enough. They're one of many teams that's good enough. We'll see what happens in January.
That's a really good qualifier because, as the Giants in particular have shown this century, it's really about what team, irregardless of what happens, even until this point. I mean, obviously your record matters to get you into the playoffs, but it's the team that is playing well towards the end of the season and rides that into the playoffs.
You only have to beat the best team once. Then you're past them.
If I recall correctly, the Giants were like a wild card or 9-7, but they
beat the 15-1 Aaron Rodgers crazy MVP Packers. And they beat that team went 0-1 in the playoffs.
And the undefeated Patriots.
Nothing matters.
So
I think Patriots are that best team that you got to beat. So if you get to the Super Bowl, then you get a shot. They're a good team right now.
Yeah, so I was just going to say, I think the qualifier is that they are not so much a Super Bowl team, but, they're in the upper echelon of teams right now.
There's many teams that are good enough. They're one of them.
Their record is legit. Their record is legit. They're an 8-2 team. They've, like I said, they had some adversity on the 2 games they lost. It could have been, some things could have been different. You insert Dalvin Cook and Sam Bradford into this lineup, and even different things could happen. But they're a very good team. They haven't had the toughest schedule. It's coming now, and that's why I will not listen to anybody talk about winning the Super Bowl on their home field and being the first person to ever do or hosting it until they play these next 3 games. The final 3 games.
Win 2 or 3 playoff games first. I'm not going to tolerate any of that talk until it's Super Bowl week and the Vikings are in it. Win playoff games first.
So, not to interrupt you, Joe, but I really think we should talk about the Vikings playing the Super Bowl at home. But Joe...
I've gotten my first wish there. The Packers are not going to be hosting that Super Bowl, or not going to be representing the NFC in that Super Bowl.
And that's our consolation trophy.
That's not guaranteed yet. Things could still go very wrong.
Okay. Yes, no, it won't happen because the Vikings in one of their last 3 games are going to make sure that doesn't happen. So no, I don't. If there's any game I'm going to pick them and know they're going to win, they're going to go to Lambeau and win. Absolutely, they're going to do it.
Or the Bengals.
Love it.
So it's not even worth talking about. Yeah, like Luke says, until they won the NFC Championship, then you get to say, wow, of course, then it'll be a distraction. Everybody will ask them that question.
Yeah.
And they'll think, oh, we got home field advantage in the Super Bowl, so we're going to win. And that'll, Zimmer will have to pound that out of their head. So it's all talk. It's what we all do. We sit here and talk and talk about it. It's a topic worth talking about, but not by me. So I'm done.
Yeah, this is all irrelevant smoke. Let's talk about the Rams game.
Okay, so back to the Super Bowl at home. Do you guys think that before we get into the Rams game, I did want to touch a little bit on, since Joe mentioned it, it was a good segue, the importance of the next 3 games. Do you think that, just kind of touching on the obviously the importance of those for the playoffs and for not necessarily building team confidence, but really showing that this team can beat some of the better teams like they've been doing. Actually, we can talk about that kind of as a segue into the Lions game, now that I'm thinking about it out loud. This is a professional recording. Let's go into the Rams game before we get into the Thanksgiving game. Obviously, it was an amazing game. It started out kind of iffy. I kind of look back at games and how they were going as to where the cigarette butts are in relation to my house, and I was definitely already outside smoking after that first drive. What do you think? How do you think the defense was able to really shut down this high flying offense, and what do you think that sort of means for the rest of the season and how great this defense is? I saw a stat on Reddit this morning that said that the Vikings have held the number 1, number 3, and number 6 offenses to a total of 40 points this season combined, and that's. Yeah,
well, I told you last week, Joe, in this really prescient comment I made, that they were going to stop the run and then go after the pass, because no one's ever said that before. They said it every week out at. I mean, Everson Griffith says it in every interview you have with him. He says, "Oh, we got to stop the run and then pin our ears back and go after the quarterback." Can't tell you how many times I've heard that statement. Well, that's exactly what they did. They came down. I mean, that first series, they came down and the Vikings were not quite prepared for what they saw coming. They made an adjustment on the side, and then Gurley did hardly a thing the rest of the game. What did he have, like 37 yards total in the game? It's just like unbelievable. And
I thought he had like 53, but maybe that was his total yards.
It could have been. I think that may have been all purpose. I'm not sure, but. They shut him down, and it made him one dimensional. And Goff is good. He looked really good on that first drive, but then they tied it up. The crowd got back into it, and all of a sudden the defense went to town, and looked like they looked like they were playing anybody but the highest scoring offense. Go ahead.
They came out with the perfect way, and I talked about this a little bit on the preview, but they came out with they were able to get pressure up the interior. And they were able to get pressure off. I mean, they were just able to get a solid amount of pressure. The front four played very well. And it flushed Jared Goff out of the pocket and made him throw on the run, which he's very bad at. So a lot of those throws were just completely errant.
And they hit him.
They hit him, and
a lot.
And they rattled the young kid. And going back to stopping Gurley, a lot of it was stopping screens to Gurley. Mm-hmm. I think Tavon Austin got 0 targets, which is hilarious. For Jeff Fisher reasons. But, yeah, they stopped Gurley on those screens. A lot of huge plays by Terrence Newman, a lot of huge plays by Eric Kendricks. A lot of big plays by Anthony Barr that didn't show up statistically. There was a lot of Anthony Barr getting the edge and setting it really well, and then someone else gets the cleanup tackle.
Am I wrong by saying that that's kind of the story of his season, where I know a few weeks ago I said you don't see a lot of, I don't do a lot of next level analytics, obviously.
He's been pretty productive.
Is he putting up good stats, or is it you just don't see him a lot on TV because
I haven't given it a very in-depth look since I wrote about him a few weeks ago, but when I did that, he was having a very explosive season statistically.
Yeah, and there are times when he just you see him the way he runs. He's running like he did as a rookie. There's a little not recklessness, but he's running footloose. He's going after people, and when he gets a chance to hit the quarterback, we know he's certainly doing that. Did you guys think that was a penalty when he got roughing the passer?
I know that you're not supposed to hit with the crown of your helmet, and I can understand why the ref did that, because he was directly behind him and his head sort of snapped back.
Yeah, it looked like helmet to helmet from where he was standing.
There you go.
Right.
So, I understand it.
It's dumb that there's no way to correct that when it's wrong.
And I get that, they overprotect the quarterback. So, it's a debate on really how the NFL protects quarterbacks a little too much. I see why they did it. At the time, I was pretty mad about it, and that's a lot of where my earlier comment about flags came from. And then there was, I think, a Thielen bad blocking. He just tripped over the guy, or he fell, and then the guy fell into him. That was a bad flag, but I see why they.
You mean the block in the back?
Yeah, I thought that was a good flag.
Yeah, that was pretty blatant. He blocked the dude in the back.
You can't
do that.
But that's his problem.
I thought that he tripped over a guy, and then it was just like they kind of ran into each other. Was that the one where he was yelling at the ref about it?
That was on Latavius Murray's big run.
Yeah, that's what I'm.
Yeah,
that's what I'm talking about.
It was still a first down. It just went 10 yards back, but it was still like first down, new downs, and I believe we still scored on that drive. It wasn't a huge deal.
Adam wasn't happy, surprisingly. He's usually not happy when he goes.
Yeah, he likes to jaw at the refs. Yeah. I do have to say this. I think this might be my favorite game Case Keenum has played of the whole season. Even I think it's more impressive to me than the Bucs game, because the Bucs are a disaster, and lighting up that defense isn't really a huge accomplishment to me, whereas the Rams have a pretty well-known defense that's supposed to be able to, like, rattle quarterbacks, get pressure, force turnovers. Getting 0 turnovers against this defense is a huge accomplishment. And I like it better than the Washington game because he didn't falter. He didn't have those, like, horribly imploded plays. There were a few kind of sketchy, really risky throws. There were some that he threw kind of while getting hit, and they, like, hung up in the air for forever, but they ended up being accurate. And even though they were in the air for forever, they ended up landing in a place that, DBs didn't really have a chance on it. I think of the one where he was getting tackled and he hit Adam Thielen on a crosser, and that DB didn't have a shot at it, and he hit him right in stride.
He did hit one off the back of the helmet of a lineman, and that Kyle Rudolph made a nice play on, knocked it out of the.
I think a defender actually tipped that. He was trying to throw it away at the feet of the running back to kind of do that, like, workaround of intentional grounding, and it looked like somebody actually reached out and batted it up to try to force an interception, which is a really great play. Really heads-up play by Rudolph, too, to knock it down.
Yeah, it was. So, Joe.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm just basking in the good feelings. I'm trying to turn over a new leaf here.
The defense played so well to bring it back. They just they were very, very disciplined in their gaps, and that had a huge that had a huge role in stopping Todd Gurley. They basically played man coverage all day and were able to at least stay decently covered on 2 pretty good wide receivers in Watkins and Woods, although they both had reasonable games still. And then Anthony Harris came up huge in the game, not only with that fumble, which was probably the play of the game, but outside of that fumble, he also had a very solid game. I think he only gave up like 2 catches, and neither of them. It was 2 catches for 24 yards, which is pretty good for a safety.
Yeah,
that was targeted 4 times.
You talk about being disciplined in their gaps and stuff, and maybe they're finally, like Joe was saying earlier, really buying into what Zimmer is laying out for them, and they're going to say, if we all play this way and we do our job and not try to freelance and
there it is,
real, and we're gonna so they're believing what he's saying, and it's building in their confidence, and it's all working. I mean, I firmly believe, and if you hear Zimmer would say that if they do their jobs, he's said this for a number of years, they're going to be fine. And even against a number 1 defense or offense in the league, they come out looking pretty darn fine. And like Luke says, it's probably because they're playing in a disciplined way and listening to their head coach.
I think that might be like the overlying message, or one of the core messages that Zimmer has, because I remember reading a quote from Harrison Smith a couple weeks ago where he said exactly what you just said, Joe, which was, we just really focus on our job. And we have so much faith not only in the scheme, which seems to be the confidence builds based on how they've had success against better teams, but just in their confidence in the guys around them, and saying that we know that if we take care of our job, that the guy next to us is going to do the same thing, and we don't have to really worry about X, Y, and Z. Well, what if this happens? Then I have to make sure that I'm still around because this guy might screw up, and I have to cover for that in his own defense or whatever. So, clearly it's working, and again, the team seems to be buying into it. And well, it's kind of it goes without saying, it does seem to be sort of what they're hammering to the defense. So, we did want to talk about. This is a good time to kind of insert this from a segue perspective. In the article that I've plugged about 50 times now, I said that the national media is finally paying attention to, and then I put insert team name later, and I thought that a good nickname for the team was Deep Purple. And I'm not actually going to say we should just get into a conversation about nicknames, especially because Joe rained on my parade based on his hatred
Get the copyright quick on Deep Purple. Get the copyright on.
Joe hates smoke on the water, so I guess that's not going to work. But the bigger point is how deep this team seems to be, and how that depth has helped both weather injuries and kind of make this team what it is now. And one of the bigger places where that's been evident is in a complete 180 from last season, especially is not only on defense but the offensive line, which has sort of been an unsung hero for this team. They seem to be playing really well on both sides of pass protection and run blocking, especially as compared to earlier in the season and obviously last season. So what do you guys think about the depth this team has?
I have to recuse myself on this answer, Joe, because I didn't even catch the connotation. I'm pretty embarrassed that the deep purple had to do with more than just the color of their uniforms, but they're actually deep. So
yeah,
sorry.
That's pretty okay. I get
that's
it.
the whole point. Yeah,
Yes,
I mean, I don't think they're the greatest band ever either. Even though as a child they were the only band my dad let me listen to.
I kind of like
record,
it.
So.
I kind of like it now, the nickname, because there's certainly the difference between this year and last year. I mean, we saw what happened on the offensive line, and Zimmer said it the other day after the game that the offensive line is the star of this team this year. That you're not in those words, but he said they're the biggest factor in the changes to it. And I think you've got a deep defense only because we haven't seen too many injuries. I said last week how I was waiting for. Surprised I'm saying I'm waiting for Sendejo to come back, and then you see Anthony Harris put up a game like he is, so it's suddenly you're feeling a lot better at safety than you might have earlier on.
And you have guys like Tom Johnson who are playing well.
Well, he's a starter. He's not depth anymore. He's just outright the starter. Shamar Stephen is the depth, and he actually is susceptible. And I kind of wish that we could get Jaleel Johnson involved more because I think he would perform better than Shamar Stephen.
Weatherly had a huge play yesterday as well.
Yes, he did. Deshaun Bauer got a sack to clean the game out.
And I guess looking at Tom Johnson as depth too, we haven't talked about this, but with Sharif Floyd, the horrible news with him, basically they don't think he'll ever play again. It's just nice to know that we don't. They did draft Johnson as a contingency plan, knowing that things weren't looking good for Sharif. But yeah, it's just having the next guy up. Even when Griffin didn't play, Robeson had a good week as well. So
real quick, gotta check you on that. Tom Johnson was a free agent signing in Zimmer's first year. He was one of the. They said Zimmer. There was actually a story about him. I think it was Matt Collar did one at ESPN 1500 about Mike Zimmer wanting I want a pass rushing 3-tech, and it's okay if he's undersized, and they ended up getting Tom Johnson out of the Arena League or something. And he ended up being. It's part of why he's playing so well for his age is because he was in Canadian football in the Arena League, and he was sitting on benches a lot. His body, for as old as it is, he's 33, I think, which is pretty old for a defensive tackle. Not a lot of wear and tear on it. But yeah, he's been on the team since 2014, so he wasn't really a contingency plan for Sharif Floyd. He was more of they just wanted a rotational pass.
I meant Jaleel Johnson was.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean Tom Johnson I've always liked because everyone says, why don't you buy a Tom Johnson jersey? Because my name's Joe Johnson. I also own about 50. I own about 50. That's what I meant. Sorry. I own about 50 Joe Johnson basketball jerseys, so I'm kind of cool on rocking my own name on a jersey. But there's a lot
of depth guy, Rashad Hill. He's been balling in the time that he's gotten in
Isadora.
Mike Remmers' stead. He might actually be playing himself into a starting role in the future. Not right now, not while we have Remmers. I think Remmers has kind of secured that job well enough, but Rashad Hill is making you think about it.
And then the position that I'm sure Joe would love to talk about is the receiver. It's a position that used to be there was no depth. There was no starters. There was nothing, for so long. And suddenly it seems like there's plenty of people that can go in there and make a play. You saw Jarius, right? Make one yesterday.
He always makes plays when they call on him.
And Zimmer's even gone down the list far enough to mention, was it Coley or Adams? One of the two at his press conference about that he can make plays.
Adams is currently on the practice squad, so probably Coley.
Yeah. So, they're deep at that position as well. They showed deep depth at running back this year by losing your starter, and the two guys have picked up the slack since then. I've really been happy at their production. Neither one of them is a Dalvin Cook, but both of them together make a nice running game with that line opening holes for him. And
We got to talk about Latavius Murray too. I mean, he's been coming alive the last few weeks. He's doing exactly what they need him to do. Yeah, like he said, he's not gonna, make anybody miss. But he's a big guy. He, runs between the tackles, and he clearly does what they need him to do. So,
actually,
shout out to him.
I don't want to shout out Latavius Murray. I still don't think he's very good. I think he had a pretty good fantasy day as a goal line back and scored some touchdowns, and now people are all over. I'm going to write an article about this. I'm actually sitting down to do it right after this podcast. But he's one of the least efficient or one of the least elusive running backs in the league. And by elusive, that doesn't mean he's a power back instead of a scat back. That means he's not very good at forcing you to miss tackles. There are many ways to do that. He's not very good at he never makes the first guy miss. He doesn't produce a lot of yards after contact, which usually those bruisers, they get a lot of yards after contact because they can fall forward for 2 on every run. He doesn't do that very well in context against the rest of the league. He's not used really that efficiently as a pass catcher because it's Jerick McKinnon's job. I'll give him he's a better pass protector than Jerick McKinnon, but in pretty much everything else you ask running backs to do, Jerick McKinnon's a better option. I like Latavius as a goal line back or as like a third down guy that you can bring in to protect shotgun passes, but Jerick McKinnon has proven himself time and time again to be a more effective running back when the offensive line isn't just like giving it to somebody holes, which doesn't matter who carries that ball.
Why do you think that the team seems to be game planning towards Murray more lately? Then do you think that they just want McKinnon as a sort of change of pace guy?
I mean, it's not unheard of for them to just poorly evaluate it. That happens all the time. Not that I think they're like, I'm smarter than the coaches, but like sometimes they have their starter and their depth chart in their mind, and they're slow to change. I think maybe it's something about keeping Jerick McKinnon fresh, especially if you're going to try to win games in January, potentially on the road in cold locations. If you have to go on the road to Philadelphia, maybe you want to have your younger guy a little fresher. I'm
looking at his stats, and obviously, I'm just wondering how much value, if you're putting too much value on his ability to be elusive versus just his ability to be efficient in regards to, like, not to take one game out of context, but like it says like this since November started, so the last couple weeks, obviously he's averaging over 5 yards a carry. That's only over 32 attempts, obviously, but when you have a guy that's putting up 6.5 yards a carry, like in the Rams game, I guess he fits the role that they need the running game to basically.
Let me counter
execute.
That because here's the question I'm going to ask: is what is Latavius Murray doing that other running back can't do? Any running back can get a lot of those yards. I remember one of Latavius Murray's big breakout runs. I mean, he had a chasm to run through, and it's great, good for him. He identified the correct hole and he didn't screw it up. But any running back can do that. What I'm looking for in a running back, when I'm deciding who I'm going to hand the rock to, is somebody that's going to create after the play has created for them. Most running plays are designed to create some level of yardage, and then it's up to the running back to get whatever they can on top of that. So what I don't like about Latavius Murray is he doesn't have much of an ability to do. He pretty much takes what the play gets him, and he doesn't get much more. Jerick McKinnon has shown a much better ability to get more on top of that, and that's where the running back's value comes in. If you just want to have somebody get, whatever whatever yardage is blocked for them, then I'll give the ball to me. I'll give it. I'll run it.
And then end up dead.
And then I'll die to a tackle from like not even a very good linebacker.
Dying to prove a point. That's Luke.
Yeah.
Mark. Yeah, and that's kind of what my point was, is that he is doing what they need him to do, and that he's just But I think it depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking. When you have someone like Cook go out, there's obviously going to be a drop in regards to bigger plays and everything. And I don't think they obviously brought in Murray to be the feature back, and that's what he's become for whatever reason. I guess I just think that we should be happy with the fact that he is doing, at least accomplishing what they ask of him, and that he's doing it at a high enough level for them to obviously kind of game plan around him being the feature back. And
I will give you that he is not egregiously screwing anything up.
There you go. I mean, it's a comparison.
High bar to
saying,
clear, but I'll give it to you.
You know, I'm not saying he's the best running back in the league or anything like that, but at the same time, he's moving the chains, and that's really all we can ask. And it's the same thing with Case Keenum in saying that, well, you know, he's our third option at quarterback since the beginning of last year. You can't really expect him to go out and put up Tom Brady numbers, but at the same time, he's not losing the games, which was the big narrative in the beginning of the season, and he's playing well enough to both keep Teddy on the bench and win games. And I think Murray's maybe not the best example of the same thing, because I think Keenum is getting better and better and is able to take shots down the field and extend plays and what have you with his legs. But it's for a team that's been riddled with injuries, I just think it's a good sign that Murray is doing what they need him to do, and he's keeping
the combination of the two
running.
has been successful enough, and I guess at that point, you know, it's fine. I guess I would just assert that I think the play design is doing more for the running game than Latavius Murray is, and I think that it definitely can improve if Jerick McKinnon got more carries, but at the same time, they're going to be split in some ratio, and I'm pining over, you know, 10 to 20 snaps a game. Who cares?
I would say that I've never had much confidence in McKinnon breaking tackles in off tackle. I mean, he's not big enough. He just struggles with it. And he usually if there isn't a hole open for him, he's going to get bogged down and knocked over. Where you get a little bit, I believe, more power coming through from Murray, and he can at least break a tackle once in a while in there.
Or like he did on that quote unquote touchdown.
Yeah. By Pro Football Focus's charting, Jerick McKinnon has forced almost twice as many missed tackles this season on fewer attempts.
Yeah, where are they though? We're not right up the gut. Maybe on the outside or when he's.
I was going to say McKinnon's got a lot of value.
Is that a knock? Who cares?
Pardon me?
Is it? Yeah, I mean, we should probably move on. But is it a knock to break a tackle on the outside, but?
I think Joe's just
my point was about in the interior of the line.
Yeah.
And they run him up there a lot, and I scratch my head at how many times, because he just bogs down and gets knocked over when there's 2 or 3 interior linemen or a linebacker colliding into him. Get him on the outside, give him the ball and in space, and let him do some more of that.
That's what I was going to say. McKinnon's value in regards to that, he seems to be, which is a huge thing in the NFL, quick enough to make plays on the edge and turn that corner, and a lot of guys can't turn that corner. That's always a big thing. You know, obviously, with guys coming from college that do that all the time, you get to the NFL, it's nearly impossible to do that for a lot of guys. So, yeah, McKinnon is amazing at that. It's just, to Joe's point, I think the context was running the ball the way that they're running it with Murray, whether or not McKinnon would be more efficient at doing that. Between the tackles and down the gut, not in general as in regards to how stats are being put together. So I mean, it seems that they found the right balance so far, and maybe they do want to keep McKinnon healthy as the season goes on. But it's, you know, we're debating a good topic. I mean, it's exciting to see the run game, especially after last season and how terrible they were.
Yeah, McKinnon didn't break that tackle and got flipped in the air.
God. Yeah, that was...
Oh, that sucked, yeah. That was a great play that linebacker made.
That was a huge... and speaking of great plays, that the Keenum to Thielen throw was one of the greatest plays of the season so far. I just wanted to point that out, where he... The one where he almost got hit like twice, he ducked down, and then he dangerously threw it up in the air and got it to Thielen. That was like amazing. But let's get into the Turkey game with the Lions coming up. Short week, another Thanksgiving Day game. It's at Ford Field. It's against the Lions, who, for whatever reason, I don't want to say that they have the Vikings or Zimmer's number, because I do feel like the last 3 games we've played them that we lost, we really should have, whatever that means, in the NFL. I felt like, after those games, we should have won those games. It left a really bad taste in my mouth. That could have been all the cigarettes I was smoking also. But, you know, is a huge game, obviously for a million reasons. It'll really help the Vikings basically shut down any talk of losing the division, give them a huge advantage there.
It's interesting, Joe.
Yeah.
It's the Detroit won both last year. The Vikings won both the year before. Detroit the year before that won both. There's not been a series split since 19. You have to go back to 2013 to get one. So Vikings desperately need a split this year in this game. Series split.
It's as much as it isn't a must-win game, it feels a lot like one. It feels like a playoff game a little bit. It's on the road. It's a big game. It's a short week. So, what are your guys' thoughts on the game in general? Kind of what the Vikings need to do to get this monkey off their back and strangle it.
I think you go back to when I wrote the preview today, I went back to where the teams were at when that last game happened in Week 4, and since that game, the Lions rolled off 3 straight losses and then 3 straight wins. So they're playing a little bit better than they did right after they beat the Vikings. The Vikings, in the meantime, have won 6 straight, and there's not a whole lot of disparity in the. I guess I didn't look at the teams that they played that well, but the Packers defense is in yardage is 23rd, and they give up 354 per game. They're the 20th against the pass and 19th against the rush. So
the Lions or the Packers?
I'm sorry, if I say Packers, I meant the Lions.
Okay.
And so the Vikings can do something with them there, but ironically enough, the last 3 games ahead of them have been relatively low scoring. Which surprises me when Stafford is one of the top passers in the league and their offense is ranked 5th, and 6th in passing. So I think I don't think they'll have trouble with their running game. Abdul is playing a little bit better than he had when he first came back. I think from injury in the first game, and
he hurt us in the first game too.
Yeah. He scored in the last 3 weeks now too, and one of them through the air. But I still think it's going to have to be I think the Vikings will shut down their defense or their offense, and Keenum's got to do a little bit more than just keep up with Stafford and match him with points. And I'm predicting a win, of course, but I really think that they've got to overcome the home field advantage on Turkey Day, and they haven't, for a couple of years, or at least last year. So we'll see what happens.
And Luke, I don't know if you remember this or not, but I think it was the Lions game, and was that the second start for Case Keenum? I think at the end of the game that you tweeted through the Purple PTSD Twitter account, if Teddy or Bradford were playing, the Vikings would win this game. Was that?
I do remember thinking that. I remember thinking that because I believe. My recollection of it is a little bit hazy, but I believe Case Keenum did not have a very good day in that game, and he left a lot of meat on the bone. And he's been leaving meat on the bone all year. He's been throwing errant passes to open wide receivers, and you got to think like, oh, what if that got caught? What would have happened?
Yeah.
And that really, I think, is the only game where it actually mattered.
Yeah. And I bring that up because I do feel like there was a quote by Thielen this week or after the game yesterday where he said that Keenum was finally basically coming into his own, or he understood the offense and the timing and everything as well now as he has all season. So it seems like maybe he was learning to play. Obviously earlier in the season he was still new to the team, still new to playing with the guys around him. I bring it up just because I feel like I'm a little more confident because he does seem to be playing better, and if that was the case back then I would have good feelings about Thursday.
He's certainly shown it. That was his 3rd start, but they scored 7 points that game. That's amazing against Detroit. Detroit's not that great of a defense. But
yeah, so I'm confident in it. But what are your thoughts, Luke?
I guess in terms of positioning, as we're looking ahead to the rest of the season, this game matters a lot more to the Lions than it does to us because we could feasibly drop the next 3 in a row and go on a 3-game losing streak and then still be in pretty good position to go 11-5 and make the playoffs comfortably. So because of the hot streak that we've been on, we have some losses to give. That said, this is probably the most impactful game left on the schedule for both teams. For the Detroit, it's pretty much a playoff game. If they drop this one and they fall, I don't even know what the record is. But if they drop this one, I think they would fall to 5-6, or 6-5 or something like that, and they would have like one loss less to give.
They're 6-4 right now.
They're 6-4, yeah. So they would fall to 6-5, and then you think, well, they have to win out to go 11-5, or lose one to go 10-6. They only have one loss to give for the rest of the season, and it puts us 3 games above them, and possibly with the tiebreaker. I'm not sure how it would shake out with the head-to-head being split. So if they drop this Thanksgiving game, it takes a huge chunk out of their playoff chances. For us, it takes a much smaller chunk out of our playoff chances, but it does bring them to basically a half game back in the division, because they'll have the tiebreaker and they'll be only 1 game behind us. So this is a huge game.
They've got a far easier schedule, though, in the rest of the way than the Vikings do.
They do.
Next 3 games, the Vikings are tough. This is probably their toughest game the rest of the way for the Lions.
True, and I think we just won our toughest game the rest of the way. But yeah, the Panthers are looking tough. The Falcons are looking tough. I don't know how the game is going on
31,
right now.
31-23 right now, Falcons. So.
Oh yeah, so they're figuring it out, which I kind of always thought they would. So yeah, it'll be a tough stretch.
Yeah.
In terms of actually beating them, I don't know. I say this every time we play them. They're not that good. We keep losing to them. We've lost to them by a combined 16 points over the last 3 times we've lost to them.
Yeah, overtime game.
And they've all come down to either the last drive or overtime. So we keep coming out, and these Lions games are always the outliers on the season. I think last year the first Lions game was, I believe, Pat Shurmur's first game after North quit, because I think North quit and the next game was the Lions. And then the Thanksgiving game, I think we had an average depth of target of 3.8 yards.
Wow.
Which is hilarious. You're throwing 4 yards down the field on average. It was disgusting. And I think there were many plays in that Thanksgiving game last year where it was like 3rd and 8 and we threw a 3-yard crosser to Kyle Rudolph. Like, what are you expecting to happen?
That was a blast.
Yeah,
we're better than this team. We just got to go out and play our game and not do stupid stuff and not try to outthink ourselves with some clever, cute yak plays or something. Just go beat this team. They've got 2 good corners. That's part of the difficulty of beating them, is they have enough of a good secondary to make it difficult for Thielen and Diggs to win. You know, the Rams, as good as their secondary is, they had Jermaine Johnson. Jermaine Johnson has to cover someone, and then a couple of their better corners got hurt. So then they had backups against Diggs and Thielen, and then Thielen went off, and that's kind of been able to happen in all of the previous games that we've won. We've had some sort of a weak spot in the secondary that Diggs and Thielen can just work against. Detroit doesn't have that. They have a lot of really solid players in their secondary, and it's relatively healthy. We've got to be able to establish the run, and we've got to go, beat a team that is decent, but not as good as us. We just got to go out and win and stop doing dumb crap and letting these fluky games get the better of us.
There it is. I wanted to, and you guys have answered it. Say, well, sort of knowing the answer to the question. Is it a matter of them having our number? And I really don't think it is. I think each game there's been different reasons for why the Vikings have stumbled against the Lions each time. Luke pointed out, what happened last season, and obviously earlier this season we were still, dealing with the Dalvin Cook thing. Keenum was still pretty fresh. But it is still, obviously for the Vikings, to keep that confidence going and to keep the national media plugged in, we need to just, beat them and soundly beat them and just kill that little mini curse or whatever it is and just come out and destroy them on Thanksgiving.
Well, what if the Vikings don't get home field advantage through the playoffs and they have to, they go in as a wild card and then they go to the Super Bowl? I mean, isn't that a mind meld for the national? Oops, sorry.
What? One thing that offers a wrinkle in all of these games, and it is a truly earned advantage that the Lions have, rather than penalties. It's not really something the Lions earn, but they do earn an advantage with Golden Tate and Amir Abdullah, both of whom are very, very good at eluding tackles. And in all of these games, I think a lot to Eric Kendricks, who has been an up-and-down tackler on this season. But even like Griffin and Hunter and Barr and guys who are usually more sure tacklers have a lot of trouble with Amir Abdullah and Golden Tate because they're good. They're very good at doing that.
Yes, they are.
So you have to break down and make sound tackles, and you can't be looking to blow these guys up.
Yeah, Abdullah is a beast.
He's quick, man. He's small, and he's shifty, like other Lions running backs through the years.
Yeah. So what do we got that? What are you guys thinking about the? I hesitated to even bring this up for reasons that'll become clear in a second, but in regards to predictions for the game, I saw a tweet earlier today about how devastating yesterday's game was to my already diminished chances of pulling any sort of comeback in regards to the competition me and Joe were having, because I think I basically predicted the correct score, but in reverse. So.
No, you did 20-10, didn't you?
I did. I thought I was 24-10.
Oh, yes, you were. We were both 24. No, I was 20. Man, whatever. Where are we at, Luke?
Yeah, this was a pretty rough week for Johnson.
Did you have to send it to NASA for quantum computing to figure out how far behind I am?
Yes. The results came back. I sent it to the one of those NCIS labs for analysis. No, it's Oberly had 24-20 Vikings win. And Johnson, you had 24-10 Vikings loss. So because you predicted 10 points for the Vikings, but the Vikings scored 24 points.
I'm up by 14. Joe's up by 13.
You're up
total.
by 14.
So
right. So Joe loses by 13 total, and then Joe Johnson loses by 31 total. So currently you are behind. Currently the deficit is 51 points of miss. So there's still plenty of season left. That's enough time to make a comeback. But it has been kind of a slow ground.
6 games left. So how many points do I have to do of a cushion do I have per game, Luke? The rest of the way.
With 6 games?
6 games, 50,
9?
like 8, yeah. 8-ish.
All right, so I just have to stay within that margin, Joe.
Well, I'm just going to run away to Canada at this point.
It's just a gnome, isn't it?
It's more than a gnome, and you already have one, and it's like your most prized possession, and I can't imagine you having 2. But I don't have any. And I've purchased probably 100 of those damn things.
It's not over yet, just like Luke said. Well, actually, mine's already out there online, so you can. I've given you a little opening on this one, especially since the last 3 games, Joe or Luke just said, were decided by a total of 16 points. So
Well, do you wanna go first?
Yeah, like I said, I kind of looked at what they've been doing since these two teams met, and so I think I'm kind of zeroed in on where they're at. But I've got let's see where the heck is. I've got it 27 for the Vikings and 20 for the Lions. I think it's going to be a little higher scoring than their other games have been.
Ooh, well, I have to balance my thoughts in regards to what's actually going to happen with trying to make up some points, and also thinking that, considering my thoughts on what actually is going to happen have been so wrong for most of the season, maybe this is the best way for me to go about it. I'm going to go with, and to build off of what I was saying earlier, I feel like this is a huge opportunity for a statement game. I think the Vikings, again, want to get that monkey off their back, do it for Zimmer. So I think the Vikings are going to come out swinging. It's a big game. It's a Thanksgiving game, obviously. The whole country is going to be watching and or protesting it. So I'm going with a 41-13 Vikings win.
Whew! Wow. 41-13, you said?
Yeah.
Woo!
That's a way to make up some points.
There you go. Or just end the whole contest.
Well, you got to go big or go home.
There you go. $1. And Luke, what was your prediction for last week again?
I got close. I
total
predicted
yard, worst game of the season, right, for Goff?
It was going to be the worst game of the season for Goff.
Which it was.
I chose a stat that it was not. He didn't throw any picks, so it didn't really hold a candle to a couple of the other. He put up a stinker against Seattle and had a rough day against Jacksonville too, and those involved a bunch of turnovers. So, but I got close. It was a bad game, just not the worst. So I maybe made it a little too bold, but that's why it's a bold prediction, and at least I picked a win.
At least was this Gurley's worst game of the year?
I am not sure. I'm gonna look at it.
But anyway, that might have been. But yeah, but you got the win right. You like me picked the Vikings to win. So
I finally just hopped on the bandwagon and it worked.
Oh, buddy.
Should have been doing that the whole time.
I had a whole narrative of blaming Luke built, and it was almost. I'm not gonna say it would have been worth losing, but that would have been the huge silver lining.
I don't need this. I don't need that from you. By yards per attempt, it was Gurley's second worst game.
Wow.
He only got 2.11 yards per attempt in week 1 against Indianapolis.
That's a darn good defense that Zimmer has there.
Yeah, and that seems like a week 1 weird fluke.
So what's the prediction this week?
I'm going to stay on the train. I cannot accept that the Vikings are going to lose 4 in a row to the Lions. It just can't happen. We're better than them. We're going to beat them.
Good point.
And I think as far as my bold prediction, it's going to be similar to the last time the Vikings played the Lions. Matt Stafford, according to PFF, has ranks 23rd in turnover-worthy plays, which means they have it as this is not including Week 11, so coming out of last week, 4.1% of his plays are interceptable or turnover-worthy in some way. Wow. That's pretty bad, and I think the Vikings are going to be able to capitalize on it better than they were last time. So I'm going to say Vikings are going to win for my bold prediction. They're going to score their first defensive touchdown of the year. They haven't had one yet.
They don't?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
God dang, I got them on.
Which makes this feel super sustainable, because that's going to turn around. That in regression to the mean in the same way that it did last year. The same way that kind of regressed back to average. We had so many defensive touchdowns and then it kind of cooled off. We're going to regress back to average in the same way, except this time it's going to go from absolute 0 to eventually something is going to happen. A lot of those are just based on luck.
The Vikings sacked him 5 times last time, and he is the second most sacked quarterback in the league with 33. So
maybe there's sacks in there.
Yeah.
Could throw some picks. He throws a whole bunch of interception-worthy throws, and he's been just infuriatingly lucky on them.
This is playing into Joe's 41-point victory. Your 41-point Vikings total. I'm concerned now.
I think they're sick of losing to the Lions. They'll be able to do this.
Yeah, me too. Well, either way, it's going to be a great game. It's going to be a great day. Thanksgiving's coming up.
There'll be plenty of food to eat that day, I'm thinking.
And it sounds like the defense will, especially Linval Joseph, will be eating a lot all day. Feed me. Well, with that, we're kind of up against the clock. Was there, Luke, you mentioned a article that you're going to be writing about Latavius Murray.
Yep, should be out on Tuesday morning.
So by the time you guys are listening to this, it should be
you're listening
on,
to this, it's probably out.
And Joe, typically also, you posted your article today since it's a short week, I guess.
Yep.
So everyone can check out his awesome game previews, which people are becoming more and more aware of, and are getting.
Did you get the title, Joe? That I was kind of a shot at you. There's no Super Bowl until you've eaten your. God, I can't remember what I said.
Until you finish your turkey.
Thank you. Until you finish your turkey. That's right.
Yeah, well, I mean, in my defense, I will say, my
entire show has been in your defense.
My entire life is in my defense. I think you should know that by now. I don't think I can ever. I'm a big person on being able to visualize things in the future. You know what I mean? Like I can't visualize the Vikings actually playing in a Super Bowl. It's just something that I don't know what I would. If there's anything with almost 4 years of sobriety that would drive me back to the bottle, it would be the Vikings playing in the Super Bowl. Oh. I can't do that sober. There's no way. I'll have to. Oh, I just can't. It'd be. Anyway, that's a good way to end the show with random noises and relapse talk. That's how we do it on the Purple
Podcast. Thanksgiving, fellas. happy Thanksgiving to all our listeners.
Yeah.
Enjoy your holidays.
I do want to say, not to get all misty-eyed, but I am very thankful for the work that you guys do, not only on the show but on the site. You know, us three are basically the core of Purple PTSD. We do 99% of the heavy lifting. And we do have other writers that I appreciate as well, but, you know, we are the three consistent guys. And the site has been growing basically at a tremendous rate, even especially lately. I mean, we've been getting a lot of feedback on social media, a ton of comments. You know, every article gets like 300 likes on Facebook, 50 comments. People are commenting on the site, even if they're telling us that we're stupid. It's still, you know, it's still cool for us. So I just wanted to thank you guys for everything that you've been doing, and you know, we wouldn't be where we are without you guys, because God knows no one wants to read exclusive Joe Johnson takes on the Vikings. So
no, don't sell yourself short. You keep it rolling. Thanks, you guys. Glad to be part of it.
Yeah, that's what I'm here for. So I'm looking forward to 2018 and Thursday, and I'm also thankful for all of our listeners and readers. And I want you to remind everyone to continue to follow us, and if you haven't, follow us on Facebook and Twitter at Purple PTSD, and our sister site is Vikings Territories. You can follow them at Vikings Territory on social media as well. Also, check out the Vikings Territory YouTube channel, because they're doing some amazing things over there as well. So, with that, this has been this week's Purple Journal podcast. Enjoy your turkey, and